So hi and welcome to this episode of In Search for Courage and Meaning. I'm Abby Keen, your host, and I am mainly a human being in search for my own courage and meaning for my own life. And I'm having such a great time talking to other fellow beings about the stuff that really matters. And I'm so excited about this conversation today. Okay, am I saying your name correctly? Khader?
Yes, Khader.
Khader?
Yes,
Okay,
Khader
because
for me.
because I'm sure you say it differently in Arabic,
It's
but I just
Khader in Arabic.
Khader.
And you can
Um,
probably say it better than most people.
yes, and so okay, so I want to explain why this feels really meaningful to me, and then I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself. Um, Khader,
Mhm.
Khader
Uh-huh.
is Palestinian, and I'm Israeli. And we are, I guess, from opposite side of the tracks. And we want to have a conversation about communication. And we said communication and what did I say before? Like my feeling is how do we bridge our backgrounds to what really matters? But I'm not going to keep going about that. I want you to introduce yourself first.
Thank you, Abby. It's great I have met you in yoga, and it's kind of such a beautiful neutralizing space where we are exactly equal and even, and there's no baggage there. So it was nice to have met through yoga classes, and I have so many different friends from so many different backgrounds. And so I'm going to speak a little bit about myself. So I grew up in the West Bank, and I was born in 1970. So by the time I was born, it was already a whole historical mess I'm not responsible for, or I can't even begin to explain or care to. It's just the circumstances of my place of birth made me who I am, embedded me with stories, ideas, supposed identity. And, but when I grew up in the West Bank, it was during very tense times, the Intifada, and I have not really met during that time any civilian Israelis uh, that are playmates or friends or classmates. We lived in two separate, isolated, where I grew up at least in Nablus in the West Bank, we're quite isolated from the Israeli society. And we have the language barrier too. Like
Yeah.
two people living so close to each other and they don't speak the same language.
Right.
And they don't even make an effort to learn each other's language because there is a mistrust. And
Yeah.
few people kind of dare to cross that. So I never understood the Hebrew language but when I went to high school, I took a Hebrew class. And that was kind of helped me a little bit pick up some words here and there. And so the only Israelis I've known were soldiers. So that does not make for a great place to build up a relationship with someone who's equal or equivalent. And that kind of created an inner atmosphere of uh, anger, fear, mistrust, sometimes hate, because this is what you're surrounded by. And this person, whether is seriously a threat to you and you are not in a way to appreciate the full humanity, not and that age it was not available to me. So but during the time when I was growing up in the West Bank, I've met some Germans and who are half German, half Palestinian. And they talked, and during that time, there was a lot of discussions of Middle East peace. And during that time, it was considered there will be a political settlement to the situation, that some smart people will cut some kind of deal and everybody would be happy. And I thought that was a good idea. We could come up with a political settlement to the Middle East crisis, and that some way somehow will improve my life and the lives of the people around me. So I believe in that for a while. And by the time I turned 18, I left the West Bank and I went to Jordan. And the West Bank during that time was really dangerous and unsafe. People were being shot, tear gas, imprisoned, intifada, all kind of unfortunate violence. So I left that and I lived in Jordan for 2 years and I went to college there. And it was just so different. to live in a society that's not at war all the time.
Yeah.
And it was such a relief to like to be able to breathe and not to feel like you are. Even when I was home, like in my own private house, I always felt the conflict is in me, and I'm in the conflict, and the conflict demands my attention. So going to Jordan kind of eased some of that tension, but you're not that far from the crisis. And
Right.
the media on both sides feeds the sense of, oh, something is happening, you better pay attention. This, something else might happen, even worse than the thing that happened yesterday. And there is this,
Yeah.
so I grew up with that kind of energy. And then I came to New York in 89, and I went to City College of New York, and I had, for the first time in my life, Israeli classmates in college. And we became friends. I'm like, oh my God, these guys are just like me. But back home, we couldn't even say hi. And now we're talking about architecture and design and food, and we had a lot to share.
Yeah.
And that kind of broke the ice in terms of the human to human interaction with Israelis in New
Well,
York.
but was it hard at first to connect, to even fathom a friendship with an Israeli, the oppressor, or was it
Uh,
natural?
Funny enough, because like when you remove the politics out of people, it was on the personal level. I didn't feel this oppressor energy. It was like there was tensions and discomfort,
Mm.
especially if we discuss politics, because they would repeat their narratives and I would repeat my narratives, and one of us is wrong, and it will end up with a dead end, and I will be frustrated and I'll be frustrated. But we didn't know how to move beyond it.
Mm.
And then I came to Rockland County at some point, and I made more American Jewish friends, and several of them were peace activists.
Mm.
And they were really well-meaning, beautiful, nice people who wanted to debate and discuss furthermore the political solution to the Middle East crisis and
Yeah.
finding some kind of a thing. And that, the more I did it, the more dead walls and dead ends I encountered emotionally within myself, because sometimes I felt invisible, and I felt
Mm.
like this is emotionally, maybe my baggage is my
Yeah.
history of not having a voice, not being seen. And if it's going to be a war of narratives, who has the biggest microphone, who can convey a more dramatic story? It was
Yeah.
that level of peace work or conflict resolution that we encountered it. And these are really nice, good people. And I was just like them, caught in the same cycle of trying to figure out what happened, who did what first, and how can we make some kind of compromise to resolve this technical problem.
Mm.
But all my life, I was interested in psychology and spirituality. And the more I learned about psychology and trauma, the more I realized, oh, no, this is really not a political problem. This is an emotional problem for me.
Mm.
And that's been my thinking for the last 4 or 5 years. I don't know if you have questions or want me to talk more about
Yeah,
that.
no, I was just thinking that what a beautiful awareness you had when you realized like that feeling of being invisible and not being seen, and connecting it to the growing up being unseen and not having a voice. I mean, not unseen so much as not being able to express, a voice as people. And I'm wondering, thank you so much for sharing all this. I can't tell you how much this is fascinating for me, because I never ever got to speak to somebody from the West Bank about how it was to grow up on that side. I only know my side, but I don't know how it is. And to be able to even be here together, um, to just listen to you is so intriguing for me. And one of the things that we talked about in yoga, when just in passing, and which made me want to talk to you even more because I really resonate with that, is when you said that change has to come from the inside and it has to begin with loving our own selves before we can really embrace somebody else. And I'm wondering if you'll be willing to say more about that.
Yeah, that's it. Kind of, if you stop in my journey and exploring the spiritual path. I mean, we're living in a strange time of human history where there's so much emphasis on identity and on saying, I am like this. And I
Yeah.
define myself by my passport, by my birth of origin, by my sexuality, by my degrees, by my interests, and I want to be that. But if you explore it from the opposite and from you and I are so much alike and so much the same in terms of human desires and needs and longing and ability to enjoy the same sunset and ability to care about life and about children. We care about so many similar things. And instead of thinking about how different I am from you and you from me, if we can embrace as humans that, okay, we can celebrate our unique differences and acknowledge that there's things you can do, I cannot do, on this and that. But on a human level, the emphasis on identity is so divisive into us versus them.
Yeah.
And even when you belong to an identity, there is smaller and smaller identities within that identity, and smaller in groups and out groups. And I've been in that climate where separation and further isolation leads to more and more disconnection and less understanding. So I kind of been trying the last 4 or 5 years, instead of emphasizing an identity, almost shedding an identity.
Oh, wow.
And in all honesty, this is not popular. This is treason. Like if you think of, like if you call your parents today and tomorrow and say, listen, you guys, I'm no longer this, everybody will declare war on you. What?
Yeah.
We are one of us. We want to keep you to represent our point of view that we have brainwashed you into believing. And to say, I am no longer this, in a way, it's a liberation, because I can come to you not as a political identity or an ideology, but I can come to you as a person.
Right.
And I think it's disarming to the other as well. If you hate me because I am this, and I tell you I'm no longer this, why do you hate me? So I've been thinking in these terms of like, because this identity thing is a little bit of an ego trap too, a little bit of a sense of, oh, it's poor me and my victimhood, or look what happened to me. And I can sit to you right now and tell you about my childhood and all the wrong things that happened to my people. And then before you know it, occupation has become some internal state, and I'm really into this poor me for the rest of my life. And it's really a prison. It's not a liberation. And I think we can deny our past and our unique identities, and we have to acknowledge them. But if we only come out of that place, then any future possibilities for human to human interactions are always hindered by this emphasis on difference and insisting that I belong to that camp and you belong to that camp, and I don't. And but the group is, what I'm saying is extremely unpopular. I mean, let's face it. We have words like treason, betrayal, shunning, and so most people don't dare to say, I really don't care what the group think. I have my own thoughts on the matter.
Yeah.
Especially when you come from a place of, especially if you come from a minority or oppressed group, because you feel like you have the duty and the national obligation to whatever, wave the flag, whatever you want to do. And that itself is, for me, is like, if some people want to do it, good for them. I don't think it helps, and I don't think it's the way forward in especially in the Arab-Israeli conflict and in many other conflicts around the world, to keep emphasizing the difference and emphasizing the unique identity versus the opposite.
Yeah.
So that's
Wow.
my
That was so well said. And I know that also, I mean, from many identities, but I know, like, being the sort of third generation from the Holocaust, there's a feeling of like, my ancestors not too far ago
yes,
died. I need to hold on to my Judaism, because if they died because of that, I need to be it for them, and so on and so it goes. But something that you said I wanted to kind of highlight, um, that when you talked about shedding the identity, what I'm hearing you say, which I so respect, is there's like, I feel like there's two different kinds of shedding. One is shedding because I feel insecure with what I am and I'm trying to fit in. So if I become what they are, then I'll feel more comfortable. And it's like we search for something outside of ourselves, almost like a desperate need to become part of the trend, part of a group that we think is somehow better. Um, and then there's the shedding by choice, like shedding that is not in order to, a shedding that comes from an inner freedom, in a sense, a shedding that comes from knowing yourself, and like being able to kind of discard layers that no longer serve, like how you described, sort of, I can make that my identity and I can have my ego latch onto it, or I can let it go, which is much harder, and almost like a more active force inside that I feel like comes from a place of working on yourself.
it's really challenging because that, like you said, we can do as much work as we can ourselves to shed some of this conditioning, some stuff that is already in our DNA, some stuff is apparent in our skin, or that there's some things we have to hold on to because we're human.
Yeah.
But it seems there's so much conditioning and so much, uh, and I don't even care about the political conditioning. I'm more concerned about the emotional conditioning. That
Hmm.
if I believe that I'm a victim, and if I believe that I have shame and guilt because my great grandfather said this and his mother said that, and because of that, I feel I'm obliged to be loyal to their victimhood story and to be loyal to their pain. If I enjoy myself, then all their suffering is for nothing. There
Yeah.
is this kind of, I really feel this in myself. Sometimes I feel guilty. I'm having a normal, healthy day. Like maybe I should be feeling guilty and worried and concerned because there's an addiction to the trauma. There's an addiction to the pain
Yeah.
and to even the sadness, and to say, oh no, you can't be happy because a lot of people suffer, right? And
Yeah.
especially as a Holocaust survivor, child of surviving family. I mean, I've heard this again and again. I can play the same, not to the
Right.
same extent, but the same kind of thinking. Oh, if I allow myself to just be free and make friends and enjoy and not have boundaries and be defensive, then I've betrayed an initial feeling.
Yeah.
And it seems that some of these initial feelings are not universal facts, and they're not moral obligations. They're like energy habits. And maybe we don't have to hold the last 2000 years in our backs the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, I relate so much to what you're saying. And I feel like it's beyond this conversation of this kind of conflict of our own tribes.
Yeah,
But it goes for everything as human beings, how to let go of what you describe. And I really feel like we were talking before we press record about awareness, because we can pretend to be beyond all that. We can pretend that, oh, we've worked on ourselves and
Oh,
we
yes,
are
yes, yes.
beyond those details, and I see you as a human to human. And I think that will be kind of a lie, or like, a way to beautify it but not be completely sincere, because
Yes.
I feel like our conditioning is embedded, like the way I was raised, whether because of my parents, my community, or just being in this country at that time, has informed who I am, whether I want it or I don't want it.
Oh, yes.
It's in my body, it's in my psyche, it's there. The distrust and etc. I'm not going to go even to details about that,
No,
but
actually, that would be a different conversation to, after breaking the ice, is to
yeah.
vocalize the fears.
Oh,
Like, is it really that is it really true that you really you hate me and you want to kill me? Right? If
yeah,
I have this voice in my head that says this, maybe
yeah,
it is healthy to really verbalize it and
yeah,
test it and say, hey, maybe I'm just making this up in my head. Maybe this is not really what you desire. And this is my own delusion. Maybe if I tell you the same, and I feel like this is what I'm saying. This was not happening
yeah,
in the political debate
yeah,
to express uh, fears, feelings, sadness, grief. And there's people who do, by the way, grief work, Israeli Palestinian groups who are
yeah.
doing very good work. And I don't want, I don't want to go there, no, in all honesty. But I mean, I haven't heard from you about your um, reactions to what does it mean to be on the other side.
Well, that's a whole other conversation, but I wanted to say, in what regards to what we were just saying, is that I think it's so important to be aware of how it's embedded in us, and how there's so many automatic responses because of the information we took in our primary years, and just to be aware that it's there.
Yeah,
And it's always, I find that it's always through awareness that we can heal, because if we just act automatically, we're it's just we're just perpetuating what's there. But when we shine a light of awareness, then there's pause and we can air things out. And for example, I even remember the first time I met you and we were chatting in the parking lot, and I realized that you were from the West Bank, and part of me was like, oh my God, that is so cool. And the next impulse I felt inside was to apologize. I felt
explain why.
apologetic towards you as an Israeli, almost like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I wanted to apologize that I am Israeli. And I feel like that is,
Yes.
maybe there's room for apology, I'm not saying, but to be aware of
Yeah,
all these different forces inside, that it's not a clean slate. There's
absolutely.
stuff.
Yes.
And only by acknowledging the stuff can we move beyond the stuff.
Yeah, but I think that requires honesty with oneself
Yeah.
and courage to show the cards, to say, like, sometimes, like, I'm like, for example, like, I meet a lot of Israelis and very well-meaning, nice people, but they really don't, due to their experience, they don't see or haven't heard of what was my upbringing like and how hard it is and why we are so angry and upset and mistrusting or whatever. And that's a little bit helpful because it can help understand one perspective, but to able to say, it really scares me. Like, I'm gonna give you an example. I am peace loving, whatever, whatever. When I drive by Jewish kids camps and I see the display of the Israeli flag, I something in me is upset and I'm quite annoyed. And I don't have a problem with the Israeli flag. I feel like, whoa, what is this occupation all over again? Or are these kids uh, being trained to hate me? I
Yeah.
really, I mean, I had this feeling. I'm not telling you I shed my skin. I had this feeling last week. I drove by a
Mm.
camp and a Jewish flag, an Israeli flag, and I have no problem with any Jewish iconography, whatever, but the Israeli flag for me represents on a psychic level
Yeah.
something that I'm not comfortable with.
Yeah.
And something as simple as this, as a piece of fabric with a bunch of colors on it, is enough to trigger me. And I can speak about it and learn how to say, oh, it's fine. It's just someone's. I mean, we could discuss the politics of that, but I do have a reaction.
Yeah.
And that's not even a person. This is not a tank. This is not a political leader that I agree with or disagree with. This is just someone's symbol and national identity. And I'm quite sure some Israelis would say the same thing if they see a Palestinian flag.
Yeah.
So there is really work to be done there. But I think the work is about that. It's about saying, wow, this thing really upsets me.
Yeah.
What's in me that I need to work on?
Yeah. So yes, so yes, because I find that whether we're talking, once again, I've said that before, but whether we talk about politics or anything in my life that triggers me, I could be triggered and just go with the trigger and react, whatever, put
Yeah.
more violence into the world, perhaps. Or I can pause for a second and say, oh, wow, I'm really triggered. What's going on? And then turn inward and see, oh, wow, this really hits this old place in me that feels so, squashed down or, um, you know, beaten up, or, in my case, like, wow, this is really pressing a place. Like I'm scared. I feel unsafe, or whatever it is. It's usually really tender, and
Yeah.
it's vulnerable, and it's really soft, and oftentimes it's very young. And if we allow ourselves to go into that place, into that softness, then we can like really face that part in us rather than just react violently outwardly. And that it just brings me back to how you were saying, like, the change starts from the inside. Real change starts from the inside with the work that each and every one of us can do. And so your description of, here's the automatic trigger. Yes, you have a lot of great reasons to be triggered, kind of empirically so. Like when you look at the situation, you've earned it. And you can be righteous about it if you decide to,
Oh, I
because you
could,
kind of
sure.
earned it.
I
But
could rage about it for a week. I could talk about it to everybody I say, and I could be
yeah,
righteous, and I could give lectures, and I could write letters to the editors, whatever.
yeah.
It's like
And you
the
can
sky's the
hate,
limit.
and yeah.
Yes.
But what you're choosing to do is instead of putting that energy out into the world, you're saying, oh wow, hold it. I'm going to look within myself, and I'm going to see what's going on inside.
Beautifully said. And also I'm very aware of the work of Carl Jung and the idea of the human shadow. That if there is something inside of me that's really make me hate or separates me from you or make me feel pointing the finger and being righteous wherever, and I don't know it that well, and I act out of it, I am doing more harm to me and to you than I know of. And so
Yeah.
this idea of saying, okay, this thing is really uncomfortable. It itches me. It upsets me. I don't feel my best self. I want to change the subject. I want to run out of the room, but I'm willing to stay and say, let's explore this together, because I think we both will benefit if we, of course, you have to have the time and the space and the connection to have this kind of conversation.
Yeah, and I just realized something as you were talking. When you say we can have a conversation about it, I feel like this is how we help each other as human beings, because even just like here we are on each other's screens having this conversation. And I feel like when you share yourself like that, you help me go inside and see my own triggers and like automatic behavior. And then I can sort of, by mirroring you, I can pause and say, oh, hold it. And, this is what's at play here. And what do I want to do about it? How do I want to be with it? So like, even just in this conversation, I feel the help in how we can talk to each other.
Thank you. That makes it seems to me that we as humans have not developed this set of skills and this language of communication up to now. I mean, not now, but I mean, in the last few years, it seems people are finally are allowing themselves to speak with honesty about uncomfortable. Like in the 60s, we could not have this conversation. There was like the political liberation movements and women rights movement, whatever movement has this clear, and it made sense in historic sense. But in this day and age, if we are to survive the coming 100 years as human beings on this planet, we are all together in this one planet, and we're all sharing, exchanging, trading, buying, selling, and coexisting. And we can't keep pretending that these emotional triggers and this mistrust or this whatever it is that we have inside of us is just going to go away by itself. It will require work.
Yeah. Oh my God, I feel like you said it, and maybe this is the best time to, at least for now, finish this conversation, unless you have anything else that you feel like you want to say, because that was so well said. And I feel like you're taking our conversation and kind of put it out like to the world in a sense with what you just said. So anything else you want to add before we, for now, close this one?
I'm really happy to have this conversation with you, and I feel like this is just the beginning. We can continue processing together and developing kind of a together perspective by having more of these conversations. And I think is positive and is hopeful. We can just pick up the phone and have this conversation and see things a little bit differently.
Yeah, because I feel like as you speak, I'm like saying, like, as human beings, it's like we have all these layers of things that we've been taking on from, birth, all that, like, as you said at the beginning, all these identities of this is who I am, oh, this is how I am, and this is who I am. And it's like, if we can talk about it, maybe we can let go of a lot of those layers so that we can actually meet sort of like the heart to heart that is beyond, that is deeper than all these different outfits that we wear.
Beautifully said.
Yeah. So until next time, I so appreciate you coming on, and anybody who's watching it, please take a second to subscribe so that we can get more visibility and spread the love in the conversation. And yes, let's do it again.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Great.
Thank you.